So we are looking at two different scriptures that are difficult, I guess would maybe be the word. They make us think about our lives. They make us think about our priorities. And sometimes we don't come out the very best with some of these scriptures if we really are listening to what they're saying to us. I know I've shared this with you often, but I remember in one time in seminary that some professor said, at some point you're going to need to decide what kind of pastor you are. And I wasn't quite sure what he meant at the time, and he said, you're going to have to decide, are you going to be one of those pastors that stands up front and preaches the word, but that is showing the infallibility of God, that you are representing him in your holy post, and so you are not showing any weakness. You are not showing any that there are any issues in your life, that you are standing up front and being completely, this is the way, and you should be just like me, of being able to be pretty much perfect. And he was kind of serious about it. Then he said, or you can be one of those pastors that just shares like, hey, I'm like one of you. And maybe if you're thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I sin, I do these different things, maybe it's helpful to hear somebody else from the pulpit saying, hey, I struggle with this too. Well, you all know which pastor I am, right? I'm not sure I could even try to be holier than thou if I wanted to. Okay, so this morning, as I'm driving in, actually Mark drove in this morning. I got to just ride in the car with him. But I was thinking about, man, you know, I really don't have a good sermon opener. Like, you know, you try to do something that kind of catches your attention, right? And I was like, I still really can't think of anything to do, but I'm sure God always just puts something in my head, and hopefully it works out for you also. But this morning, Bill gives me this envelope. Bill, I told you I'm going to use this morning. Bill gives me this envelope, and it was sitting right here, right before. And so I didn't have a lot of time. It was, I don't know, 10 till whatever time it was, those of you who I was talking about this. Anyway, so I pull out these pictures, and he put 2 pictures in here. And so I look at the picture, and my first thought is, whoa, man, I've lost like 50 pounds, but look how big right? Josh was with me. Look how big I am even here. Wow, I thought like mentally, like I was just, you know, feeling pretty good. Like, oh yeah, wow. So I look at this one first. And then I'm like, well, maybe it's the picture. So then I look at this one and I'm like, whoa. Okay. My long deceased mother, who I love and miss dearly, is in this picture right here. My children, our children from 2012 when this was taken, are right here. It's the most adorable picture of Trey and JC, Sydney, and Katie. And I did not notice that for how many minutes did I stand there? Now, come on, it wasn't that long. 2 minutes, a minute? I don't know, Mark, you were kind of involved. You were quiet. He was very smart, just being quiet, right? But anyway, so I'm just like still trying to figure out, to process this. So I said to Bill, oh, Bill, thank you so much for these pictures. That's so sweet of you. And it is. I love with my mom and, you know, the kids. But as I was walking back up here then to go get my robe on, as when I hit me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was the first thing I did, was look at me to see, you know, isn't it, I don't know, maybe you're not like that. Maybe you would have immediately not went there in your head. But I just thought, isn't that just interesting? I'd like to think that I'm representative of the human race, that we all have foibles and that we all fall into this trap. So maybe you've done something similar. If not, maybe don't tell me, because then I'll feel really bad about myself. But I'm guessing that when I'm going to read a list of words, which was going to be my sermon opener, and maybe should have been, but here is a list of words that I just want to see if any of these resonate with you, okay? And then I want you to think about why they resonate with you. Do they resonate with you because you go, ooh, yeah, that could be me sometimes? Or do they resonate with you, oh, yeah, that's totally my brother-in-law, right? And maybe it is totally your brother-in-law, but Notice if you start finding other people with these words that you bring to mind, or can we self-reflect also? And maybe you're the least vain person that I've ever met, so maybe you don't have a lot of self-reflection you need. But I'm guessing most of us maybe do. So here we are, vanity. You know I never start a sermon with a Webster dictionary, definition, but here we are. Because, again, we don't really use this word a lot. Excessive pride in or admiration of one's own appearance or achievements. Excessive pride in or admiration of one's own appearance or achievements. So I'm all for self-positivity, right, and all of that. I'm all for that. But you notice the word excessive, right? So that's where we get into trouble. Okay, so here are some synonyms. I'm going to go fast. Conceit, conceitedness, self-conceit, narcissism, self-love. And again, self-love and balance is a very good thing, but not imbalance. And that's going to be our whole sermon thing right there, is the imbalance. Self-admiration, self-regard, self-absorption, self-obsession, self-centeredness. Did you know there are so many words that talk about vanity? Egotism, egoism, egocentrism, egomania, pride, haughtiness, arrogance, boastfulness, swagger, imperiousness. I'm not done. Cockiness, pretension, affectation, airs, show, ostentation, and vain glory. So all of those words, I'm guessing we must have an issue as humanity if we came up with all those words, right? The opposite, it gave one word, modesty. Now, I would think we can think of other ones, or the opposite of some of what we just said. There's a second definition of vanity, which also very much coincides with our scriptures today. The second definition of vanity is of being the quality of being worthless or futile. So that one we have to kind of wrestle with a little bit more. And then the example they gave, the vanity of human wishes. The vanity of human wishes. Well, let's see what is happening in our scriptures, okay, now that we've kind of set the stage. Again, our scriptures are usually printed on the back of your bulletin. If you'd like to follow along, we have pew Bibles, obviously if you brought your own, or pull it up on your phone. But let's look at Ecclesiastes. So we have these kind of pieces that are pulled out for the Revised Common Lectionary. Again, every 3 years we catch these scriptures. Ecclesiastes 1, 2, and then you've got 12 to 14, and then chapter 2, 18 to 23, because they all kind of go together. We'll talk about that too. Hear the word of the Lord. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher. So I might as well jump in and stop real quick. So the teacher, we'll go into that a little bit more, but again, he identifies himself, the words of the preacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem. So usually you think, again, that it's going to be Solomon, but actually quite a few sources now will say that this was much later than Solomon's reign. But again, it doesn't mean that we can't still learn from it or presume that maybe Solomon would be actually have written similar words. But we're not quite sure that it actually is Solomon himself. But again, maybe that doesn't matter. But the actual translation is one who calls an assembly. So some translations will say teacher, the leader of the assembly, or the preacher. And so I personally like the preacher translation. I think, to me, that makes the most sense. And so that's what we're going to be doing. Okay, so that's when every time it says the teacher, it's the writer of this book. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And again, in the ancient scriptures, in Hebrew scriptures, whenever you repeat something, it means it's important. So remember, they didn't have qualifiers. So it's the most important thing. They didn't have that ability in their language, so they would instead, the more that you use the word, the more important that it is, okay? The more that it makes it a superlative. Okay. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity, okay? So are you getting this was pretty important. I, the teacher, when king over Israel in Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to human beings to be busy with. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see, all is vanity and a chasing after wind. I hated all my toil in which I had toiled under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to those who come after me. And who knows whether they will be wise or foolish. Yet they will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned and gave my heart up to despair concerning all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes one who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave all to be enjoyed by another who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What do mortals get from all the toil and strain with which they toil under the sun? For all their days are full of pain, and their work is a vexation. Even at night, their minds do not rest. This also is vanity. So, a lot happening there. A lot. So again, as soon as the writer identifies himself, and you can see why a lot of people thought it was Solomon, because he says there he is, the king over Israel. But again, the manuscripts are dated later. But he says right away that here I am, this is an important thing. And we can assume, again, that this is kind of the Israelites when a kind of a new day had dawned, and they weren't living this quiet agricultural existence anymore. Remember how they would depend on the manna from God, and you couldn't save the manna because it would go bad. So they literally, God would provide food for them every day, and they had to just trust, and that's enough. And this food is enough for me, and I'm going to eat it, and I'm going to trust God will provide for my family tomorrow. And so now things are kind of changing a little bit. They had lived now on this crossroads of this kind of a new booming industrial trade, if you will, between Egypt and then Asia/Europe. And so fortunes could be made probably quite literally overnight. And so the Israelites were kind of scrambling to get rich at this time. So you can see how that there could be some real issues right away from the get-go. The Hebrew word for vanity is chabel. And again, did you notice that the preacher uses this 5 times in the verse, and actually 38 times in the book of Ecclesiastes? You don't see it, I don't think really anywhere else, or if so, very rarely, but I'm pretty sure nowhere else. It's also translated as meaningless in some other translations instead of vanity. So obviously it's an important word. We saw it a lot. But what's so important about it? Well, vanity means vapor or breath, literally a translation, vapor or breath. Now, I know many of you know that I am a huge Rob Bell fan. Rob Bell is a theologian / speaker, and he has a wonderful video. You still can find it, called Introduction to Joy. Mark and I, every once in a while, will pull it out and look at it. It's maybe 40 minutes long, something like that. Introduction to Joy, Rob Bell. Highly recommend it. And you just pull it up, and then he's talking. It was like at a bar or something out in L.A. is where he used to live. But he's talking about all these different moments that he finds joy. And so he uses all these different like pictures that he's showing, that he just notices these things that just bring him joy, or would bring anyone, I think, joy, especially just funny things that he saw, of just noticing life and living in the moment is kind of his point. But then towards the very end, he takes like a little spray bottle and he sprays, and then he talks about this passage in Ecclesiastes and what that means, that this vapor, we spray it, here we are, oh, now it's gone. And that each and every one of us, our lives are as that. And that can be difficult, which maybe is one of the reasons why people usually don't preach on this script very often, on these texts, because they do talk about tough things. Yeah, you work all you want. You do exactly what you want in your life. You save up what you want. You do exactly, make all these really important things. And guess what? Within 2 generations, maybe 3, no one's going to remember you. Yeah, you work on this, and yeah, maybe there'll be something that you can give millions of dollars, and then there'll be a building that has your name on it, but at some point that building's going to fall down, or that building's going to be replaced by something else. So is that something for us to be upset about? Yes, it probably does upset us if we are kind of caught in this whole vanity cycle. Vanity, vapor or breath. It's what happens kind of, if you can imagine it too, like it's a really cold winter morning, right? And you're going out to scrape your car. And you see that breath that comes out. You can actually see the breath because the breath of God is there, right? It's actual. But then that stays where for us, that goes. You see it for a while and then it's gone. Vanity is whatever is, this is, I thought, a really interesting quote. Vanity is whatever is left after you break a soap bubble. So vanity refers to what is meaningless, futile, passing. And the preacher, therefore, then uses vanity as this metaphorical term throughout the whole book, really, to refer to what is without real substance, without permanence, without significance, without meaning. And so he talks about all the things that we toil under the sun. And one of the things I'm hoping that the people, maybe just women, but if any men want one, obviously they're welcome to, from reading that Start With Hello book, kind of talks about that, of that slowing down, that what is really important in life, and really thinking about that. And then also going, is it this life? Because that's a whole other question. Or is it living for the next life that is forever, where this one we know is not? So he continues talking about this idea of vanity of vanities. And then he closes his argument in Ecclesiastes with the same verse that he has in verse 2. Ecclesiastes 12:8, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. Well, again, studying Hebrew is very fascinating. My Hebrew recognition has really gone to pot after I have been away from it for quite a while. And I still can do a little bit, or at least a pronunciation, but to actually, I would not trust myself to actually read a Hebrew text and be able to translate it accurately. I wouldn't trust to share that with you because I would be afraid that something wouldn't be, I would miss nuances because there's a lot. But anyway, so he talks, and this is a thing that's called inclusio, when you start with one thing and then you end with another. To kind of showcase, and again, we do that too, I think, in our current writing, but especially in the Hebrew language, that when you start with something and then you talk and then you say it again at the very end, that it implies that everything in between is talking about the bookends. Jesus does it too. Last week, I just thought of that. We did it last week when we were talking about prayer. And Jesus had a couple of things about prayer, and then at the end he talked about prayer, and then in the middle was this parable, which again is the same inclusio concept that, okay, so all these things in the middle, he was talking about prayer. That's how we know that, because we know that's a literary Hebrew device. So everything, all is vanity. Everything in life, basically they're saying, he's saying, presuming that it's a male, and it would have been at that time writing, is meaningless. So before I go on, again, I want to mention, before you go, oh, this is a really uplifting sermon, glad I came, or glad I tuned in, is that the preacher does give a corrective, okay? He says that everything in life is meaningless without God. So there's the part, that piece that we were maybe missing as we were sitting there going, woo, everything's meaningless. Well, then what's that about? I think the preacher's ultimate purpose is to show that we can live a meaningful life only when we live it in right relationship to God. If we don't live our lives in a right relationship to God, then indeed everything in life is meaningless. But if we live our lives in a right relationship, then everything in life is meaningful. After this inclusio statement that he says, the preacher then gives his conclusion, then right after that, actually at the very, very end of Ecclesiastes. He says, the end of the matter, all has been heard, fear God. So he's like, okay, so all this other stuff, here's my final selling point, right? If someone's there to sell you something, and that last thing that they say to try to get you to believe, you need to have this washing machine, here it is, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Period. Amen. That's it. And again, others would, and I would myself also, would interpret this with a healthy fear and more of a respect, healthy respect than necessarily the type of fear that maybe sometimes we think of. And then he goes through and kind of talks about earlier then, in between these two bookends, he talks about how we won't gain anything from our toil. I think it was the week before, actually, that we read our scripture. Can you add 1 year to your life by worrying, right? We know those scriptures. And then we also have to then ask the same type of question. What is the value of our ceaseless running? What's the value of that? And maybe some of you have changed that. Whether you still have a busy life, but you've just went, no, I'm getting off the hamster wheel. Or for maybe some of you, you're in a different season of your life, and now you are taking more time. And maybe for some of you, it's more time than you would like. And you're like, okay, yeah, I'm starting to get depressed. Maybe I better get out and be doing some more things to be more busy or more connected. It's not the busyness, it's the connection that we all need and want. But then somewhere over on the other side is the opposite. I can't even have time to think, much less make a connection with people. Again, that's one of the things that's really highlighted in that Start with the Low book. So what is it in between? How can we find that balance? Well, again, one of the things I wanted to mention, and maybe you noticed it, is that in our scripture that I just read from Ecclesiastes, the preacher asks a question, and then he keeps talking about it. Did you notice? Ecclesiastes 1:3. What does mankind, everybody, gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? So did you think about that? Maybe you read that and you go, man, this guy must think we're all farmers, or that we all are like outside all the time. So this term gain is translated from another Hebrew word, yitron, and it's unique to this book. And the word comes from a verb that means to be left over or to remain. As when, like, you invest in a business and you pay expenses, and you receive income, and at the end of the year you kind of check to see what's left over. So gain can be translated as profit. So if you read verse 3 with that translation, what does man profit by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? So this under the sun thing, again, is extremely important, especially in Ecclesiastes, but that's where we see it. Because under the sun is also found only in the book of Ecclesiastes and nowhere else in the Bible. And he uses it 29 times. I haven't written down if you want to know where, but 29 times in Ecclesiastes. So to understand what he's saying, you need to understand this phrase also. Under the sun refers to living in this world without taking God into account. Now, that's just my take, but most theologians have had that take also. You maybe will have something different, and if so, I'd love to chat. It would be fun. One commentator puts it this way. He says, the scene in mind is exclusivity that the world that we can observe, and our observation point is at ground level. So we live under the sun. Under the sun. But God's perspective, as it were, is above the sun. So what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? The answer is nothing. Nothing can we gain. When we live our life apart from God, under the sun, meaning things of this world, we will not gain anything from all of our toil. The preacher supports this by referring to ceaseless rounds of generations and of nature also, which I'm actually going to talk about in a couple weeks when we start a new series on nature. But he concludes again that people's labor, like these rounds, things that just going round and around, kind of like the hamster wheel, produces nothing of significance or lastingness or satisfying. And that's why sometimes we go, okay, well, I'm doing all these things. Why am I not happy? Like, I have money, or I'm going out with friends, or I have all these things that I think should make me happy, but yet I'm still not happy. I feel like I'm living for myself. That's the time when you go, hey, when was that Back Bay mission trip again? Because that really quickly, something like a mission trip, can completely put your life in perspective when you see how others are living. And then when you start living for others, as you do, at least during that week, on a trip like that. One commentator at the Bible, one commentator of this section says the preacher is not so much claiming that human beings are utterly oblivious to the past, as he is undercutting their deepest and vainglorious, there's that synonym for vanity, aspirations to secure some permanent place or remembrance in history. A life oriented towards legacy for posterity only pursues the wind. The future cannot be controlled any more than the past can be remembered. So the prophet preacher says, we will not gain anything from our toil when we toil under the sun. And I just want to really briefly touch lastly upon our New Testament reading that Melanie had written. Matthew 16:26, for what will it profit, there's that word again, profit, man, if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? When a man forfeits his soul, he has gained nothing. There is no profit, there is no gain. It's similar to Matthew 6:19-21. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, you all could answer this probably, there your heart is also. And then the last one from that same, Jesus' same teachings, John 6:27a, do not labor for the food that perishes, for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you, Jesus will give you. You can't serve two masters. We know that's biblical as well. So how is it that we work through all of this? Well, for the kids' time, I was going to do this activity with them. So I have I'm being a good steward. These are all little toys that Sue found downstairs in the Board of Christian Ed closet when she took literally everything out of there and spent 4 days cleaning things out. So these are just little, I think most of them are McDonald's toys. They look like it, yeah. So then I brought these small little sandwich bags. And so my sermon with them was going to be, how many of these can you fit in there? Like, hey, do you like those? You know, I wasn't going to say, like, do you want those? And then say, no, you can't have them, and, like, you know, do that to kids. But I was trying to think of some way to get them to go, oh, yeah, I want all these. Okay, great. Oh, wait. Okay, great. Right? And that they couldn't fit them all in. And then we were going to talk about, and again, this we could maybe do with, I don't know, a garage. And how many cars do you need? How many toys do we need? You know, not just the men, women too, right? But just talking about that of like, okay, so this is enough. You have 2 toys. You can play with those. That'll be a lot of fun. And I was going to give them to them. But then looking and going, well, but, you know, less is, or, you know, not less is more, but the opposite, like, oh, no, I want more. I'll be happier if I can just get a different car or some new clothes or a better iPhone or, you know, fill it in the blank. And then we were going to just kind of talk about that, right? About how that it's okay to be able to just be happy, and it's biblical with what we have. Now, I knew I was going to have a rough time with kids going, it's biblical to not want this entire box of toys. But as a kid, right, wouldn't the kid go, oh my gosh, I want every toy I can possibly get. Why is this, you know, an issue? But, you know, I think it's equally hard on us, right? I think it's equally hard on us to go, well, I have too much for my own barns. Right, I had a really good harvest, and I just have too much for my own barns. So I'll just build more barns. I have so much stuff. I really don't need it, but I got a raise and I bought some stuff and I like this stuff, so I'll just go buy another self-storage place to put my stuff in. And again, I'm not, you know, hammering on those of you who have self-storage, okay? But that's an example, right? The rest of us who don't do a self-storage have maybe a packed attic full, right? But if we can think about, okay, what are the things I need? What are the things that other people could use? What are the things that I am doing in my life right now that are just strictly for me? What are the things that I'm working so hard and I'm putting such an emphasis on these different things, and you know what? It's really not important. What's important are other people. It's not important that the first thing, that I saw myself in a picture. What's important is, that memory of that loved one. Or, yeah, gosh, yes, we serve each other. We serve each other. So how often, again, can we immediately, unfortunately, get caught up into our own desires, our own wants, which again goes into, remember the long list, the 30 different synonyms for vanity. The good thing is that I want to leave you with two things. One is we're going to head over to the table where that we are forgiven, that we are, God acknowledges to us that I get it, you're not perfect, I get it, and that's okay. I love you anyway, and I forgive you, and we're going to start out with a prayer of confession. But that we also can change. And the first part of change is recognition, right? Can you change something if you haven't recognized something? Anybody? Can you do that? No. Can you think of something? I can't. I cannot. If you want to change something about you or your life, you're not, or the world, you can't do that until you notice that there's a need for change. And so, I hope that if there's nothing else that you get out of this today, is that you are thinking, you know what, I need to self-reflect a little bit. I need to kind of pay attention. I need to notice some things about my life. And maybe that's all you do. But I'm guessing by midweek, maybe by tonight, I don't know. I hope at least through the Spirit's intervention as well, is that you'll start to notice some things. Wow, I've always done this, but gosh, why am I doing that? Am I doing that so everybody can see that I'm a good person and I did this? Or am I doing this to help that person? And I think that you'll find that there's a little bit more of the self-absorption in general in our society than maybe any of us want to admit. But my last piece of good news is we can all start fresh. So wherever we are, right now, with this gift of grace, we can all start fresh. Thanks be to God.